Okay, it's the April 16th class of the College Prep English class for homeschoolers at Excellence in Education. Let's share the screen.
I don't think my entire series box is as thick as this one.
Okay. I've given you all kinds of interesting stuff to play around with today, and I have some other things that I want to add to it. Let's look at the agenda and see them all. What really struck me is this wonderful little, it's about a 3 or 4 page manifesto, I think is probably the best word for it, by John Taylor Gatto, which I gave you a couple of paragraphs of, and I gave you a link to the rest of it. I assume you've all read that one, right? Okay, good. Generally, I mean, this may sound disingenuous based on past experience, but generally I try not to insert too much ideology from one particular perspective, and when I do, I try to provide the opposite. I regard this as a bit of an exception. I feel that talking about the advantages of homeschooling and the disadvantages of public school is something we can probably all agree is something we ought to go at. If I can find some cogent and reasonable arguments to the contrary, I'd be happy to entertain them and examine them, but bring some in if you have any.
I don't know a single one.
Haven't heard of one yet.
Well, there are arguments. There are some interesting arguments. I only recently discovered that Sweden has illegalized homeschooling for the past 3 years.
Well, in California, homeschool's illegal. We're technically all in private schools.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So Sweden went a step further. They said,
Essentially, yes, which is rather disturbing. And in fact, it's very controversial. But it'll be interesting to see how that turns out. And indeed, the concept of having a rather loosely defined set of homeschool, or at least private schools, is in its way even better. Because I like, for example, and indeed that's part of what I'm working on right now, I like the idea of a few families getting together and saying, okay, here's our school, and we'll trade off doing have a number of different age groups, number of different interest areas, and handle it all at once. Okay, let's take a look at our all right, the agenda. What struck me as much as anything else about Gatto's conclusion, in fact, what would Gatto say there? He says, I've concluded that genius is as common as dirt.
Yeah.
Well, it's very earthy, isn't it? But indeed, I couldn't look at that and not think of this other article that I wrote some time ago. This originally went into the California Homeschooler. And as far as I can tell, back issues of that have never gone online, and it has gone defunct or changed its format altogether. So I had to find another source for this article, and I put it up. This is Chloe and Mark. And Mark was in this class for 3 years. And he played us a number of things on that keyboard over there. Did you get a chance to watch his performance?
I saw part of it.
Yeah. Part of it.
Just, how can you watch part of that?
I saw it.
Okay.
I listened to it while reading the article.
Right.
Yeah, and it's amazing. When you watch it, you almost don't believe it for a second. You think, wait, a kid is playing that piece, you know.
He would have liked to do all 3 movements. They just had him do the first movement, but he was ready to do all of them. And his mother told me afterwards that he had fallen asleep before the performance. He was, had crashed out on her lap. I was wondering, but he got it together, went out there, and he did the job. Absolutely amazing. Anyway, this little essay I thought was just worth looking at. Does anybody have any comments upon it as an essay?
I liked it. It was a fun read.
Mm-hmm. I mean, both of them, I think it's pretty I don't remember if it was your article or the other one that said, that listed out all those famous people that none of them either go through the full
That was
public school. That was Gatto.
yeah.
That was Gatto, yes.
Yeah, and it's very true that public school, you don't need schooling always to be enterprising, because we're taught today that school is the road to success, and yet so many people who are successful never went to.
Bill Gates dropped right out of Harvard and created Microsoft.
Mhm.
There's an example.
There are so many examples. And in fact, if you look at the great minds of history, you find very few of them were comfortable in school.
Mhm.
If they were comfortable in school, I think one has to conclude that that comfort has been bought at the expense of originality and creativity.
Like,
If you see what I mean.
like what he said with, they won't skip grades until you're in third grade, and by then they've had enough time to level you out with everybody else.
Exactly.
So by the time you're in third grade,
I mean, I was just in the other room and there was this kid, I think he was maybe 8, no, he was probably 9, right? 9 or 10, I think. Wait, yeah, so he was 9 or 10. And I was talking about algebra and he was fascinated. He said, he said he never knew how to graph a function before. So I was showing him, and then he like,
that's great.
I was looking, he was like, I see. And the kid's like this, he's getting all excited. And I thought,
and this is ideal, really.
Right after I read the article too, I was like, this fits so perfectly.
Even more than homeschooling. It's great to run into somebody like you that can actually do more for kids schooling than anything else of interchanges. He's marvelous. And indeed, I remember in the sand in the park doing Cartesian plane with my kids, and then they got it. It was a perfectly reasonable thing, and it's one of the most powerful tools. You can, wonderful idea, and I'm so glad you did that. Look for opportunities to do that. And when you come across somebody who knows things that you would like to know, take advantage of that. If you can manage to get them to share them with you. It's amazing how many people have expertise that they're more than happy to share. And if they're cagey about it, want to get paid, or don't have the time, I'm sorry, you'll find somebody, probably a better teacher somewhere else.
That's what I love about programs too. If you don't understand something, there's so many people who come out and put up all these kinds of tutorials on how to do it. I mean,
it's a marvelous world, isn't it? Everything is so available there. It's just a completely different thing. Anyway, one of the points I really thought was important here is that not all homeschoolers are like Mark. He's sort of a special case, but there is no question. Given the opportunity to excel and to bypass the drudgery and popular distaste for intellect that pervades most schools, every child is a special case. Every child has special promise in one way or another, if only it can be identified and fostered. And I don't think we're doing as good a job here as we could be doing, but at least we're trying to find it wherever it is. And so keep looking, look around for things as they come up.
I mean, it's really true, because I used to hate math in public school. The teachers when I never really got it. And I still don't love math, but now I understand it, and it's more enjoyable to do math now.
Remarkable how much fun math can actually be. I hate math too, but I hated it for more pragmatic reasons. The big one being math actually took work. None of us I had in school really took any work, just go through the book quickly and it just came out nicely. Math, you had to sit down and do the problems, that sort of thing. Well, just practically, I said, math is not something I want to get into. That's just too much work. So I never took any. The last math class I took was not quite pre-algebra. At the time, I didn't really need it for a fine arts major. But then later on, I ran into math people. And these were people who just were doing these things for fun. And I really got into it, really started playing around with it. I have taught math classes in college. I've never taken any. And so it's perfectly possible to do that and suddenly realize here's an absolutely amazing world. Speaking of which, I don't have it up here right now, but I'll put it up. There's a math problem that has gone viral in Singapore. And I was looking at it, and I'm sort of getting towards the solution. Just posted out there. I think you'll enjoy it. I've been playing with that this morning. Okay. So another one of the points that Gatto makes, which I think is just so important, and I think that's in the section here that that I gave you to look at. Where did I put it?
Which part?
Basically, what he's saying is, don't assume that things are age inappropriate and give kids everything.
Speaking on this subject, another thing was a cool story my dad told me. There was a principal at the school, and he had this kid, ADHD or something else like that, one of those minor disorders. But the special needs class was full. The only empty math class was the AP class. And so we put him in there without telling the parents, and he still got the same grade he used to get in the special needs class.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, the thing is, they have the problem, so we make it easier. If we push them and we keep pushing them, they'll grow to that level of ability. Not always, but a lot of times.
It's also a question of pushing. And there's one thing in Gatto's contention here that I take issue with, and that is give solitude. Mm-hmm. Make them used to having an internal dialogue and keeping themselves interested and not bored. I'm not sure that that's the best way to achieve that goal. Mm-hmm. Put people in a room on their own, take away their cell phone. I mean, I'm sorry, that just doesn't seem to me to be the right solution. But if you give them something that's really inspired, something that's that draws their attention, they need the solitude in order to play with it. And that's the ideal way, I think, to do it.
There was, I think it was the third last paragraph, the way it was written.
Okay, I don't think I have the whole thing up here, but we can bring it up if you like. It's the boredom threshold he's talking about here. And indeed, boredom is something that our age just seems to suffer from endlessly. And yet we have so little justification for that. If you lived in a house that had only one book in it, there may be some justification for boredom, but that's not the way the world works now, does it?
The thing is, though, 100 years ago, people occupied themselves with so many more things. I remember I took a quick glance at, it was some book for 8-year-olds on building little mechanical toys and stuff to keep yourself occupied. And the stuff in there was so complex, most 20-year-olds couldn't do it now because there's always something to fill your time with. It's just whether you try it or not.
Whether you want to try it or not, exactly. Because today, the only thing people want to do is watch TV or, oh, there's nothing on TV. Oh, there's no movie. Oh, Like my dad said, even back then, people learned that's what they did. If you had money, people enjoyed it. That was a pastime because, there was no TV, there was no movies, they would just sit there and read and learn because they wanted to learn. Whereas kids nowadays are going to school because they have to.
There was this one founding father, I don't remember who it was. It might have been Madison, but whoever it was, he spent so much time in his dad's library. His dad had to drag him out to go and play with his friends. He forced him to go play, even though he said, "No, I want to stay in the library and I just want to read."
Absolutely, and here's one of the questions: is the father right to have done so?
I mean, I don't know. I do think there should be social interaction, but at the same time, if the child is so apt to learn, then leave. Indeed,
this is one of the big questions. I've just had rather a major interchange with a friend of mine in Taiwan who's educational psychology, and they have a very different cultural framework when it comes to education, and they have a phrase when she gave me this phrase, I told her, well, not 1 in 1,000 American students would have any idea what that means. These 3 can do something with it. Filial piety. Have you ever heard of the word filial piety or the phrase?
I know what
Never heard
piety
the phrase.
is.
Like
Filio is
filio.
love of.
Filio.
Not
What
necessarily.
does it mean? Is that the same root that philosophy comes from? Or
No.
no, it's not. The same root.
It's Latin, not Greek, and so it's
It's Latin.
it means literally son. So in other words, essentially honor thy parents, and this assumption, this piety towards one's parents, which is a big thing in many Eastern. I can certainly understand that. After all, it's a part of our culture as well. It's in the Bible. But one of the responses that I got, not from her, but she conferred with one of the experts there, was that in this country, individualism is noted as being more important than filial piety. And that's individuality is an interesting question. Should it be more important? I have to agree, in certain ways, in our Western society, we do regard it as more important. However, if you look at public schools, no. Public
it's
school
the
does
exact
everything
opposite.
to absolutely squash individuality.
It is the problem. Most of the school systems, it's a lot of times it's the opposite of what it says it is. Schools like to teach, be yourselves, be individuals, but in actuality, they're, like you were saying, they're destroying the individuality by turning everyone
The problem with
into
it,
conformists, basically.
Here's your level. Too bad. If you're dumber, too bad. Either catch up, slow down, but here's the mold and you have to
Right.
follow it.
Yeah, and you have to fit into that mold. Really, you're not going to get anywhere until you do. And that
Yes.
kind of a perpetual browbeating is necessarily going to prevent stepping outside of those artificial fringes.
And so what happens with most kids who still want to do well is they just end up, okay, I'm just going to learning it. I just need to know, okay, that's how I get the A. That's the only thing that matters.
Yeah, or I think, I don't remember who told me this, but it's more like the public school teaches you, they don't want you to learn. They don't teach you, for example, math. They don't teach you how to actually solve math. They teach you to pass the tests, in a sense.
Well, that's a matter of necessity too. They are.
Yeah, exactly. They say, we need you to pass the
Well,
test. Exactly. So then they don't focus on, are you getting it? Instead they say, okay, here's how you do this. This is how it's done. Go take the test and pass,
There was this one school that they had to have their kindergartners pass some writing test. So they taught them to write a sentence. They had no idea what the sentence meant. To them, it was just scribbles, but they've now passed whatever standardized test it was. They barely knew what any of it meant, but they can write the sentence. That's all that matters.
Right. No, you've seen through it fairly well, I think. And as Gatto puts it very well here, I think at the end, the good news, once you understand the logic behind modern schooling, its tricks and traps are fairly easy to avoid. School trains children to be employees and consumers.
This is the part I liked.
Teach your own to be leaders and adventurers. School trains children to obey. That sure sounds like filial piety to me, if you see my point. Obey reflexively. Teach your own to think critically and independently.
Well, was it?
There's a contradiction here, however, and you folks, I think, understand where that is. When your teacher tells you, now listen to me, don't listen to me. You see what I mean?
Exactly.
It's very difficult to put that point across. You're either going to what you're being taught, or you're going to question it. But if you're being told to question it, how does that work? How do you manage to get that point across? And I think it's important. So please make a point of that. You have to be very careful, however. Don't jump up the wrong tree. If you get your facts wrong and you end up criticizing something you've been taught, a textbook, a preacher, whatever it is, and you being wrong, that can be a major step backwards. Make sure you get it right, but then go ahead and ask the questions. Sometimes it's very dangerous to do so. To keep that in mind. So well-schooled kids have a very low threshold for boredom. When you, and I'm sure this has happened to you folks, at least the programmers among you, when you get interested in something, boredom does not rear, does it?
No.
I mean, you don't even pay attention to what time it is. You don't pay attention to whether it's time to sleep or time to eat. This way is one of the best ways in the world to learn, to find that kind of fascination.
And that was what some professor decided to do. He performed a little experiment. So he went to kids in grade school, to a school that was, they said a lot of our kids are failing their tests. So he went in and he said, okay, he set up all his computers and told the kids, we're going to make video games. And all the kids were so lost in it the entire day they did that. And they tracked all the students. There was a rise in that one classroom. Like I think 30% of the ones who had failed jumped up dramatically from ever since that point, which is interesting because it just took that little spark of inspiration for them to keep learning the math.
Right.
There.
Right.
They said, "Oh yeah, you can get better at the programming if you learn more math." So then they go off from there.
Here's another one of the big questions: is the standard approach is 30 students in a class with a teacher. I think that it's fairly easy to demonstrate that an enormous amount of learning can take place without a teacher. You don't necessarily have to be doing it in big batches like that. You just talked about meeting an 8-year-old and explaining Cartesian planes. This is the ideal way to go.
I remember in a private school I used to go to for 3rd grade, they had the teacher and he would teach. They had teacher. Basically, they kept us under control, but other than that, every now and then he'd take batches to teach one thing or another. But for quite a bit of the time, we'd be left to our own, and he'd say, here's some stuff, but there were a bunch of books and resources, and we'd just go around, and the older ones learn from the younger ones and explain to each other. That's what we did the entire class time.
It's ideal if you can put it together. It's very difficult, of course, to organize and to mandate, but it could be done. The contention that we can't possibly do it any other way, that is pernicious. Pay attention to that. Okay, where are we here? You folks have all read that, and one of the things I gave you on the Gatto page, the complete book, The Underground History of American Education, I'd leave that up to you. That's not something you want to read through cover to cover necessarily, but it's a lot of useful and interesting material in it. And as you can see, Gatto does write well, at least I assume it may have gone through some sort of editorial process here really well, at least not improv. Okay, let's go on. We talked a little bit Gilbert and Sullivan, but it's very difficult to get a feel for what it is until you jump into it a little bit. And I'm afraid I sort of threw you in the deep end here, expecting you to make some sense out of this. I think it makes a little more sense to talk about it a bit first and get a little bit of background. Well, tell me what you thought of what you saw and how much of it you saw.
I saw the first 5 minutes before I got dragged away doing something else, and I never got around to it.
Forgot about. I'm with you for the first. I think it was the first 10 minutes, but I almost couldn't hear what they were saying because
some of it is hard. This is very difficult. Gilbert made a point of trying to make everything as understandable as possible, as audible as possible. He directed many of them. He was the librettist. And his words are marvelous. We're going to look at some of the words today and get a concept for how that works. Able to follow anything operatic. And he tried to make it as easy as possible, but then even there, he fell sort of short of that problem. Of course, will also be the fact that he was highly educated. The language is superb, but not American would necessarily understand, as you'll see. All of the words in there are words I think we should know if we're going to know anything about our own literary history. But they're not used that often anymore. One of the words that came up was Connubial, because it came up. That was, in fact, what brought this to mind. So you all know what connubial means, right? In fact, I asked you all to go through all of the words in Nathan's vocabulary list and the ones that we added to it. And I'm sure you were going to do a quick, I'm sorry?
I went through about half the ones added so far.
Okay. And you've all studied them, right? You
yeah.
ready?
Oh boy.
Okay. Now, clairvoyance was on your list, I believe. Clairaudience, I think, was the original one. What's the difference between clairvoyance?
Clairvoyance is the one where you can read into like tones and you can read into tones and hand motions and so on well. And clairaudience is where you're doing it from a more supernatural sense of listening in with almost superpower or magical use of some sort.
There's an assumption of extrasensory perception of some sort in there, but clairaudiences that aren't there, and clairvoyance is seeing things that aren't there. It makes it's a simpler answer to that one. What about psychometry? I gave you that. Remember that one? Psychometry. Psychometry would be the ability to pick up an object and
like
history.
psychokinetics.
Yes.
How about psychokinesis?
Moving things with your mind.
Excellent, excellent. Categorical suggested axiomatic. What is axiomatic?
Isn't that part of an system?
Axiom.
Yeah.
Or,
It comes
sorry,
from axiom. Yeah. Indeed, what's happening there is if we're looking at any kind of a logic construct, certain things are givens, and then from those one can derive other conclusions. But the fact that it's a given means you take that as is and assume it to be the case. It is therefore axiomatic. It is the axiom upon which you are working and which you take as a universal given. Irrefragable, incontrovertible. I guess that was just ineluctable, if you'd like, unavoidable.
Yeah.
How about
Or inevitable.
We had ignominious. Ignominious.
It's on the tip of my tongue. Ignominy.
Actually, I have
Go ahead.
a word for they have some other fancy word for tip of my tongue. I don't remember,
Ignominy.
but it'll turn up in my next.
I think I've had it in my vocabulary journal. Ignominy.
I'm trying to think of a good way to define it without defining it with another word that would be just as difficult. Something that's it's an adjective and it's describing something that's not acceptable, inappropriate, and in fact bad on your record, so to speak. Ignominy. And the other word, of course, is opprobrium. And to say something to someone that is clearly deprecatory, pejorative, that would be opprobrious. That's spelled with an O, opprobrious. Okay, and okay, there were more here that we went through. We don't have to go through a lot more, but animosity.
It means hatred between two
Very good.
people.
Some sort of
Like the animosity is kind of.
Okay, yes, hatred, dislike, hostility is another good word for it. Inimicality is a nice one. Inimical, what does that mean? Having the characteristics of an enemy. So showing envy, acrimony, rancor, wonderful words that to mix them up in your okay, laudable. Something that's laudable is deserving of praise.
Yeah.
Oh.
And I see approbation, laudation, encomium, or plaudit. These are all wonderful words. Look them all up and make sure. Proselyte, Remember what your proselyte was? It's less common than the word that I suggested looking up, and that's to proselytize. Yeah, you've got to know that one.
There's so many, I think, or it might be confusing one with another one.
It's to attempt to root people into your way of thinking.
That's right. Yes.
And we have idiosyncrasy and idiosyncratic. You said argot, which is a rather obscure word. I said patois. You're talking about some very specific jargon. It might be in a particular field of interest or of study or profession or something. Patois, of course, is the French for that. Okay, and conjugal, see connubial. Well, we're going to see connubial up here. Okay, have you gone through all of these?
I have, but that was last week, and I think I know these words, but I almost can't pull them up.
It's very
But
difficult to come up with
It's where
definitions.
if I was taking a test and they asked me what this was and they gave me 4 choices, I would be able to pick it.
I think
And
you're
like,
probably
oh, yeah,
right. What I'm asking you to do is much more difficult than that.
Finding
Come
the
up with a
meaning
definition.
Of a word in the context of choices is much easier.
Indeed.
I was, in fact, that just happened to me earlier today. Last week, I was talking to my mom, and I was like, there's a certain word I was trying to think to describe something, but I couldn't quite put my finger around it. And then maybe something, and then it just had the word, and I just saw it there. I said, that's the word.
Mm-hmm. You will find that happens more and more as you get older. You will find it happens more and more as you know more words too, because you know it's out there somewhere and you just cannot put your finger on it. I have struggled sometimes for half an hour trying to figure out what's that word that I really want. It makes you look like a real idiot. Okay.
And then when you find out the word, you just think, oh goodness, who's right there?
Right, and then it
Yeah.
sticks in your mind for a while. For the next couple of weeks, you've got it on the tip of your tongue if you need it, and then it fades away again.
Yeah.
Okay, let's take a look. I gave you a Gilbert and Sullivan page. I'm not going to visit that now because well, I think I may actually have it all. No, I guess I don't. I didn't bring it up because it had videos on it and slowed the machine down too much. But what I did was I took a lot of selections. I gave you the whole of the Mikado. It's a nice production of it. Let me give you the background. Gilbert and Sullivan ended up writing comic operas together. Gilbert the words and Sullivan the music. Sullivan was an amazing musician and unfortunately never really achieved heights as a composer that he deserves to have achieved. Instead, he's really only known for the comic operas, which themselves are absolutely brilliant, but frivolous and silly, but brilliantly so. Gilbert did a few other things, wrote a few other things, many of which are really worthwhile, but his big achievements, again, were these operas, the Gilbert and Sullivan operas. There are quite a few of them, but there are only about 7 or 8 that are really very popular and particularly good, the Mikado being one of them. There was an exposition, a Japanese exposition in London at the time, and you could go and see all of these the vases and the fans and the accoutrements and the costumes and the traditions and so forth. And that's what inspired this. Of course, they're writing this, setting it in Japan, but they don't really know an awful lot about Japan. And so it's really lampoon of the British, but it's sort of planted over there. So it's rather clever. Interestingly, it's always been very popular in Japan. Let's take a look at it here. I just threw up a number of things in here at the end. Now, these are sort of arbitrarily chosen. It's all brilliant. Some of it's a little bit less easy to appreciate. Some of it is more simply background and plot line than anything else. But I thought it'd be worthwhile just to look at some of these. The plot is, Gilbert and Sullivan plots are awfully predictable and common after you figure out what's going on. But basically the plot is the Mikado is the ruler of the land. His son has gone missing. His son has apparently caught the eye of an elderly lady in his father's court, and she ran away, is what happened. Now the Mikado is described in this first one, and it's really very clever. Our Mikado, our great Mikado, virtuous man, when he to rule our land began, resolved to try a plan where young men might best be steadied. So he decreed in words succinct that all who flirted, leered, or winked, unless connubially linked, should forthwith be beheaded. Okay, you understand what he said here.
Yeah.
Every syllable is in the right place. And of course, I'm not going to sing it to you, which I could do because those of us who have followed this know every word of them. But notice that the poetry is amazing. And this part here is just the chorus. The chorus all sings this together. And I expect, or the chorus follows up on it and at the end of each of the stanzas. I expect that you all agree that he was right and all was right as right could be. This stern decree, you'll understand, caused great dismay throughout the land, for old and shy and bold were equally affected. The youth who winked a roving eye or breathed a non-connubial sigh were upon condemned to die. He usually objected. And you'll allow, as I expect, he was right to so object. Okay, so you understand what's happened here. You've got these draconian, we'll look that one up, draconian laws, well, just winking or leering or looking or certainly flirting. Anyone who flirted was immediately beheaded, and beheading was a pretty common thing to happen there anyway, so that it sort of wove that in. Now, here's the other part. The town doesn't like this idea. They're sort of suffering from this, and so what's the solution? And so we straight let a convict from the county jail, whose head was next on some pretext condemned to be mown off, and made him headsman. For we said, who's next to be decapitated cannot cut off another's head until he's cut his own off. Okay, to stop the beheadings, they take the next person to be beheaded and make him headsman, figuring, well, he can't cut off anybody else's head until he's cut his own off. Clever concepts, right? And so we've got this. Now we discover that they're making up this world over there, and so they decide has been the office of headsman has been combined together with the office of judge, and so because there's no moral distinction really between the judge who pronounces the sentence they roll the two together. So apparently this is a very important and a very exalted position. And so this poor character who'd been thrown in jail, who's a cheap tailor, as he's described, suddenly finds himself Lord High Executioner. And he enters, and Gilbert has all kinds of fun with this. Here comes this fellow, and he's talking to his situation. I've skipped the part where he explains his situation, how he was exalted to this this position, and to them that eventually we're going to have to find a victim. And if we do need to have a victim and cut off heads, it won't be hard to find somebody that nobody's going to miss. And the clever text he uses here. Someday it may happen that a victim must be found. I've got a little list of society offenders who might well be underground and never would be missed. There's pestilential nuisances who write for autographs. All people who have flabby hands and irritating laughs. All children who are up on dates and floor you with them flat. or persons who in shaking hands shake hands with you like that. That's up to the actor of that is going to look like. All third persons who on spoiling tete, they none of them be missed. They none of them be missed. Now you have to keep in mind that this is very dated and this was a specific time, and the performance of this takes this particular piece and updates it and puts new and interesting different things into it and writes new material. This is the original here. There's the banjo serenader and the others of his race and the piano organist I got. The puppets, they never would be missed. That's the idiot who praises with enthusiastic tone all centuries but this and every country but his own. Think about that one for a moment. That one's brilliant. That's perennial. And the lady from the provinces who dresses like a guy who doesn't think she dances but would rather like to try. And that singular anomaly, the lady novelist, I don't think she'd be missed. I'm sure she'd be missed. Okay, you get the idea here. And then it goes on that this is a legal term that who now is rather rife. The judicial humorist, I got him on the list, and funny fellows, comic, and the none of them be missed. They'd none of them be missed. An apologetic statesman of a compromising kind, such as, and here he leaves out all the names and who they're going to be. The task of filling up the blanks I'd rather leave to you, but it really doesn't matter whom you put up on the list. No, that's right. They'd none of them be missed. They'd none of them be missed. And then here's another version that I thought I'd throw up here. This is one that was made by Idle. Who is he? Oh my goodness. He's one of the Pythons group. And he's the one who wrote most of the music that they use. So he's done the same thing here, but updated a little bit. There's interior designers, window dressers, and that sort. Bank robbers who retire to Spain, or those who have their noses pierced, or men who dye their hair, or idiots who host chat shows and disc jockeys everywhere, and customs men who, fumbling through your underwear, insist they'd none of them be missed. They'd none of them be missed.
Well,
the people
technically in Japan, I thought everyone dyed their hair. So
in when?
In Japan, I mean, everyone does it.
Oh, that's an interesting point. That's an interesting point. Yeah. Well, of course, we pay no attention to the fact that all of these references have nothing to do with Japan. Let's see if we can find another one. Or waitresses who make you wait, accountants of all kinds, and actresses who kiss and tell and wiggle their behinds, and poncy little singers who enter by dressing up like women and by singing far too high, and who on close observance must be either stoned or pissed. I don't think they'd be missed. I'm sure they'd not be missed. And some very clever things in here, if I recall them correctly. To the inland, from the Inland Revenue, and the gossip columnist, I got him on the list. Comedians and weightlifters and opera singers too be missed. They none of them be missed. All traffic wardens, bankers, men who sell Venetian blinds, all people who wear silly ties, Australians and little editors whose papers are the pits, who fill their rags with gossip and with huge and floppy. And here he lets you think what you wanted to put there and use it. But anyway, yeah, I think you know by now you have got the gist. They none of them be missed. You get the idea. It's very clever material. Okay. This is the entrance of three girls. Actually, the one that comes before this is a beautiful piece of music, superb piece of music. But this one's very famous, the Three Little Maids from School. And that I don't know that we necessarily have to go through that, but do read it so that you can understand it when you hear it. One of the guy of Nanki Poo, who is the son of the Mikado, and he's fallen in love with her. She is the ward of Koko, who is the new Lord High Executioner. Okay, so now here's how these tie together. Read that one. It's good. Now, a whole lot of things are going on here. The Lord High Executioner wants to marry his own ward. Rather odd thing, but that's the way things tended to work then. And so there's no point in Nanki Poo courting her. So he's about to kill himself. However, the Mikado is going to come to town, and Koko needs to find somebody to behead. And he's been told, well, he should want to behead himself. He's next in line after all. And he explains, well, no, I can't possibly do that. I'm professional. I can't do something that I can't enter into a project that I can't see as likely to succeed. And so he's about to hang himself. Poo's about to hang himself. So Koko comes up and says, substitute. And so persuades Nanki Poo, okay, let be beheaded executioner, and said, well, what advantage is that to me? And then it turns out that he ends up saying, okay, he'll let him marry the girl, Yum Yum, for a month, and then after a month, he has to be beheaded. Okay. And so it is clever. And this is an amazing little chunk of poetry I just threw in there. Think about this scam. To sit in solemn silence in a dull, dark dock in a pestilential prison with a light, long lock, awaiting the sensation of a short, sharp shock from a cheap and chippy chopper on a big black lock. Okay, there's a lot of things going on here structurally in this, and the is very unusual for one thing. What? What's going on there? Well, I don't know the extent to which you're interested in learning about scansion, that is to say, what is iambic pentameter and iambic trochaic dimeter and so forth, which we can do, and you learn all of that in about 7 minutes, I think. But what's unusual here is the molasses. I'm sorry?
How do you spell, what was it, the sang, something that you just used to describe the poem?
Scansion.
Yeah, how do you spell that?
Scansion. I think. Never asked me. Okay. This is unusual here in that a molasses. We can talk about the different kind of metric feet. You've got the iamb, which is da 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 da, and the trochee, which is da 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 da, and the anapestic, which is da 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 da, and the dactylic, which da 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 da. Okay, those are very common, and everybody knows them. And you've got a few other really nice ones. Amphibrachic, which is da 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 da. But there's one which is simply 3 emphasized syllables, all da da, and that's what we've got here. It's called a molasses, and you won't find it very often. So sit in solemn silence in the old dot dot. In addition, of course, to end rhyme, which he's got going on here, he's got 2 sets of alliteration in each line. Sit in solemn silence, dull, dot, dot. He's stuck all kinds of things together with all of that alliteration combined together with the end. Now, upon achieving this, Pooh-Bah, who is a patrician, he's a nobleman, and a lot is made out of that, proposes a toast at the wedding. Okay, well, what kind of toast do you give someone who's going to be beheaded in a month? Okay, as in 1 month you've got to die, if Koko tells us true, 'twere empty compliment to cry long life to Nanki Poo. But as 1 month you have to live as fellow citizen, this toast with 3 times 3 will give life to you till then. Okay. You understand?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Then the old lady from the court comes and finds Nanki Poo and demands him, and he's about to get married, and everybody tells her to get lost. And Away, nor prosecute your quest. From our intention well expressed cannot turn us, they say to her. The state of your connubial views, notice the word, toward the person you accuse does not, for he's going to marry young Yum, and they go on with the chorus here. You anger pray bury, for all will be merry. I think you had better succumb. Join our expressions of glee. On the subject we pray you be dumb. You'll find there are many who wed for a penny. The word for your guidance is mob fish in the sea. Very clever writing, if you see what I mean. Not at all, Johannes. I'm trying to remember where we are here. Oh yes, this is the entrance of the Mikado himself. Now the Mikado is as utterly mad. And he has some weird ideas. For one thing, he's perfectly willing to behead his own son. There's a lot of precedent for that, I gather. But this, again, is a very clever presentation of the mores as they existed in England at the time. It has nothing to do with Japan. They really didn't understand enough about Japan at the time. But what he's done is he's here, into which modern material is often inserted. Now let's look at the original here. Never did in Japan exist to nobody's second. I'm certainly reckoned a true philanthropist. It is my very humane endeavor to make, to some extent, each evil liver a running river of harmless merriment. My object all sublime, I achieve in time to let the punishment fit the crime, and make each prisoner pent, unwillingly represent a source of innocent merriment, This all, of course, is the chorus, and this is repeated again and again. Okay, now we go into what he thinks are particularly dreadful enemies of society and what should be done with them. Now, let's just how cleverly this is put together. All prosy, dull society sinners who chatter and bleat and bore are sent to hear sermons from mystical Germans who preach from 10 to 4. The amateur tenor, whose vocal villainies all desire to shirk, shall during off hours exhibit his powers to Madame Tussauds waxworks. In other words, sing to nobody at all. The lady who dyes a chemical yellow, or stains her gray hair puce, or pinches her figure is back, painted with vigor and permanent walnut juice. This is a Baudelarization. Look that one up for you. What is to Baudelarize? It's on that list, by the way, I gave you last week. I'm sure you all went through all of that. I told you to, didn't I?
But isn't it to stutter?
No.
Not stutter, but to ramble.
Okay, Nathan's looked it up. Good for him.
To edit by omitting or modifying parts.
Right. To take something that's offensive and cut it out. What do you suppose might originally have been in this position? If the original is blacked like what rhymes with vigor? I'll let you think about it. They took it out because, of course, it is offensive, and that's an example of what Baudelarize means. Okay. Who, in railway carriages, scribbles on window panes, may only suffer to ride on above her parliamentary trains. My object will sublime, and it goes back to this. There's one part at the very end, and this is something when writing poetry, make a point of finding best and put it at the end. Hit your audience with that at the very end. The advertising quack who wearies with taste yours, his teeth I've enacted shall all be extracted by terrified amateurs. The music hall singer attends a series of masses and fugues and ops by Bach interwoven with Spohr and Beethoven at classical Monday pops. The billiard sharp, whom anyone, his doom is extremely hard. He's made to dwell in a dungeon cell on a spot that's always barred. And there he plays extravagant matches in fitless finger stalls on cloth untrue with a twisted cue and elliptical billiard balls. Think about that for a moment. If you're a billiard expert, then, and apparently one who tends to cousin and connive and beat people, and so you're expected to play with a twisted cue on a cloth with a twisted cue and elliptical billiard balls. Wonderful idea. Fitless finger stalls, by the way, this was what they had before Band-Aids were invented. Little sort of conic, cylindrical things that you slide over the finger, just to make things more difficult. Okay. Oh, this is just a delightful little, has nothing to do with the plot really, but it pulls it together nicely. Let's give it a try here. See how the fates their gifts allot, for A is happy, B is not. Yet B is worthy, I dare say, of more prosperity than A. Is B more worthy? I should say he's worth a great deal more than A is happy, oh so happy, laughing ha ha, chaffing ha ha, nectar quaffing ha ha ha, ever joyous, ever be undeserving A. Okay, we're talking algebraic symbology here. Okay, if which I'm not, B should enjoy A's happy lot, and A should die in misery, that is, assuming I am B. But should A perish? That should he, of course, assuming I am B. B should be happy, oh so happy, laughing ha ha, chaffing ha ha, necker quaffing. Condemned to die is he, wretched meritorious B. Just think about what went into the thinking in that. You all understand the word meritorious, right? Okay. Okay. I don't know that I should necessarily. Let's just look at one more piece here, which is probably the most famous from the whole thing. What's interesting here, that so many parodies of this have been written. My parents wrote a parody of this one, actually. But this is a wooing song. Because what has happened is Coco has been persuaded by Nanki Poo to court this lady from the court who is pursuing him. Because Nanki Poo, who is now officially dead but isn't actually dead, is run away with Yum Yum, turns out to be the son of the Mikado, and now Coco is to be beheaded, boiled in oil, I think, for having killed the son, the heir apparent to the throne, who's actually not dead, but he refuses to come to life again as long as this lady is running around chasing him. So you woo her out of the way, and then I can come back to life, and you won't have to be boiled in oil. Anyway, that's the idea. So here, Coco, this rather odd, sad tailor, cheap tailor, who we know all the way through, is singing this song to this lady. Now, the interesting thing is we have this refrain on it, on the end of every stanza, willow, tit, willow, which is imitating the sound of a bird. And he kills off the bird in this first or second stanza. Willow, tit, willow, going to come from on the end of all of the subsequent stanzas. Watch how he does it. On a tree by a river, a little tomtit sang willow, tit, willow, tit, willow. And I said to him, Dicky Bird, why do you sit sitting willow, tit, willow, tit, willow? Is it weakness of intellect, Birdie, I cried, or a rather tough worm on in your little inside? With a shake of his poor little head, he replied, willow, tit, willow, tit, willow. He slapped at his chest as he sat on that bough singing willow, tit, willow, tit, willow. A cold perspiration bespangled his brow, oh willow, tit, willow, tit, willow. sobbed and he sighed, and a gurgle he gave. Then he plunged himself into the billowy wave, and an echo arose from the suicide's grave. Oh, willow, titwillow, titwillow. Now I feel just as sure as I'm sure that my name isn't Willow, titwillow, titwillow. That 'twas blighted affection that made him exclaim, oh, willow, titwillow, titwillow. And if you remain callous and obdurate, I shall perish as he did, and you will know why. Though I probably shall not exclaim as I die, oh, willow, titwillow, titwillow. Isn't that absolutely just exquisite in its own peculiar idiomatic way? And it's a way that I hope you folks will appreciate enough to go back and watch it now and understand what's going on in it. You think so?
Yeah. Especially now that I get the story, because I wasn't able to follow. So wait, this person is doing, it's kind of, I think it's mainly in the chorus because there's so much voices going off. It's very hard to hear.
Right. Have the text in front of you. It'll help just to follow the.
Yeah.
On the ones you gave us, are they doing the original one, or have they changed it? Have they changed some of the stanzas?
That's a good question, and to be absolutely certain, I don't know, because I didn't listen to all the parts of that one. I haven't seen that one before. It looked very standard, as though it was well presented and well pronounced. I have difficulty with watching something like this with a southern accent or something, but I'm afraid I didn't watch the whole thing. There's been so many versions of it. What you tell me whether it follows it or not. Okay. We could look. Let's see, where are we here? Maybe the older assignments. There are a number of other operas, and there's so many of them that are utterly brilliant. I would be happy to look at others if this is of interest, but I'll let you look at this one first. It was the best one that I could think of immediately. But they all cover very, very different material. This one set in Japan. Then there's The Pirates of Penzance, which is about dance. Anybody know? It's down at the end of Cornwall, off the lower left-hand corner, the corner of England is Penzance. And it's a convoluted plot, but one of the things that's so utterly brilliant, this one and that one, is that there must be 40 different amazing songs that are put together for it. Just there's some of the others may be clever, but they just don't have the consistency of content that these do. One of the early war, and HMS Pinafore was the name of a ship, and it's about the sailors on the ship, and one of them falls in love with the captain's daughter and mixed up babies in childhood. It's got some very clever and iconic things in it. And then it came later on. He did a number of others, one of them about the Houses of Parliament, and it has fairies in it, and houses and lords in the House of Parliament. It's an odd combination of things. And one person who's a half fairy, he's fairy waist up, but human from the waist down. Anyway, it's a brilliant one too. That one's called Iolanthe. And I think my favorite of the entire lot is one called Patience. Patience was a parody of the movement at the time. Very poetic, very aesthetic movement that took place at the end of the 19th century. And Oscar Wilde was one of the major figures in the more flamboyant ones. And
isn't Emerson and Henry David Thoreau?
Yeah. It was. You're thinking of the Transcendentalist movement, yeah. Right? And I'm not sure Transcendentalist really applies to them, although it had its influence.
Same era.
But it's very clever about poets and the mores of poetry, and really, that one is also just full of brilliant things. Then there's one called The Gondoliers, which is about gondoliers in Venice, and there's one called the Yeomen of the Guard, which is about the Tower warders and so a lot of different places. And there's a very creepy one called Ruddy Gore, which is about a curse. And we could look at any of those, and they're all in fact very good. Okay. We can look more at the home listening and thinking it might be pleasant. So, but I was thinking more. This. Have you read this particular one? This is in the Golden Age.
Is this the one where they meet the artist?
This is not the one where he meets the artist.
Oh.
That's the Roman Road.
That's the Roman Road. I think I read a little bit of this one. So I remember the year was in its yellowing time in the face of gold.
This entire chapter is one of the most amazing chapters that you'll find in any book, I think. It covers, you just look at it and you realize this is poetry. It's not line-oriented. There's no scansion involved. By the way, what definition did you find for scansion? Sorry.
I think I have a history here.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to put you on the spot or slow things down.
I can't find it.
Let's see. Yeah, this is. I told you about the background here. They have an opportunity to ride on these wagons. So they play these, so they reveling in the privilege of riding in the empty wagons from the rickyard back to the sheaves, once we returned toilfully on foot to career it again over the billowy acres in these great galleys of a stubble sea. It was to sailing that we inland urchins might compass, and hence it ensued that such stirring scenes as Sir Richard Grenville on the Revenge, the smoke the Nile, and the death of Nelson had all been enacted in turn on these dusty quarterdecks as they swayed and bumped afield. Now think about, there's a lot of implications in here. One of them is these kids have a hell of an education. And you find that all the way through, not just in what they talk about, but in this one, for example, he throws in bits of Latin, bits of Greek, which tend not actually to come through into the Gutenberg versions that we're looking at here. And but indeed, they knew their history, and they were reliving their history.
Yeah, I did. I noticed that one.
And so he and his brother have an altercation, and as a result, with earwigs, he jumps out and finds himself a long way from home and in another town. And then he runs into someone, a clergyman evidently, butts into it. And I noted at once a faraway look in his eyes, as if they were used to a plane of vision and could not instantly focus on things terrestrial, being suddenly recalled thereto. His figure was bent in apologetic protest. "I pardon, sir," he said. "I am really so absent-minded, I trust you will forgive me." Now, most boys would have suspected chaff under the courtly style, this courtly style of address. In other words, they assume that he's making fun of them or something like that. "I take infinite credit to myself for recognizing at once the natural attitude of a man to whom his fellows were gentlemen all, neither Jew nor Gentile, clean nor unclean. Of course, the blame on myself, adding that I was very absent-minded too, which was indeed the case. I perceive," he said pleasantly, "that we have something common. I, an old man, dream dreams. You, a young one, see visions. Your lot is the happier. And now, resting all this time on a wicket gate. You are hot, it is easily seen. The day is advanced. Virgo is the zodiacal sign. Perhaps I may offer you some poor refreshment if your engagements will permit. Note the language. This is a 12-year-old. My only engagement that afternoon was an arithmetic lesson, and I had not intended to keep it in any case, so I passed on, while he held the gate open, politely murmuring, "Venit hesperos ite, capilai," come little kid, and then apologizing abjectly for familiarity, which, he said, was less his than that of the Roman poets. You can get all the little chunks of Latin thrown in. This one is Latin, Greek. And he comes into the house. The descriptions are wonderful. And this rather flaky and absent-minded old gentleman invites him to tea. And then he realizes who this person is, that he's heard of him. So we passed eventually through a dark hall into a room which struck me at once as the ideal I had dreamed but failed to find. None of your feminine fripperies here, none of your backs and tidies. This man, it was seen, groaned under no ants. Stout volumes in calf and vellum lined three sides. Books sprawled or hunched themselves on chairs and tables. Books diffused the pleasant odor of printer's ink and bindings. Topping all, cheered and heartened exceedingly, as under foreign skies the flap and rustle over the wayfarer's head of the Union Jack, the old flag of emancipation. And in one corner, book piled like the rest of the furniture, stood a piano. This I hailed with a squeal of delight. "What does strum?" inquired my friend. His natural wish in the world. His eyes were already straying towards another corner, where bits of writing table peeped out from under a sort of alpine system of book and fool's cap. "Oh, but may I?" I asked. "At home, I'm not allowed to, only beastly exercises." "Well, you could strum here at all events," he replied. And murmuring absently, "Ha age dic Latinum barbite Carmen," he made his way, mechanically guided as it seems, to the irresistible writings he was out of sight at call. A great book open on his knee, another propped up in front, a score or so disposed within his, he read and jotted with an absorption almost passionate. I might have been in Boeotia for any consciousness he had of me. So, with a light heart, I turned to and strummed. Notice the language here. Those who painfully and with scaled the crags of mastery over musical instruments have yet their loss in this, that the wild joy of strumming has become a finished sense. Their happiness comes from the concord of the relative value of the notes they handle, the pure absolute quality and nature of each note itself are only appreciated by the strummer. For some notes have all the sea in them, some cathedral bells, others a woodland joyance and a smell of greenery. In some, fawns dance to the merry reed, and even the grave centaurs peep out from their caves. Some moonlight, and some the deep crimson of a rose's heart. Some are blue, some red, and others will tell of an army with silken standards, music. And throughout all, the sequence of suggestion. Up above, the little white men leap and peep and strive against the imprisoning wires, and all the big rosewood box hums as it were full of hiding bees. What's he talking about there?
Playing piano.
Right. The white felt hammers hitting the strings from the back are the little men that strike the imprisoning wires. Spent with the rapture, I paused a moment and caught my friend's eye over the edge of a folio. And then he gets into this odd conversation with this man. He doesn't really know what the other fellow is talking about. He makes some assumptions, though, and manages to say just the right thing, so that they end up in this conversation about German politics. And we get a bit of Greek that shows through here. And so he's called out to tea in the garden. They see this old tramp, a dingy tramp, satellited by a frowsy woman and a pariah dog, and catching sight of us, he set up his professional whine. And this just filthy and nasty, and the old man is so kind, but his pockets are empty. And so they end up going off without anything. But you can see a certain tenderness in the aspect of the tramp as he's going off into the distance. And this old clergyman is so interesting here. He says, "See, friend, bearing somewhat on my shoulder, how this strange thing, this love of ours, lives and shines out in the unlikeliest of places, in the fields in the early morning, barren acres all, but only stoop, catch the light thwartwise, and all is a silver network of gossamer. So the fairy filaments of this strange thing underrun and link together the whole world. Yet it is not the old imperious god of the fatal bow. And we throw in the Greek there. Not that, nor even the placid respectable, another word for God, and know what they were, but something still unnamed, perhaps more mysterious, more divine. Only one must stoop to see it, old fellow, one must stoop." Very strange, insightful images that Graham uses. He does that a couple of times in another really remarkable language. I'd leave it up to you. This is a book that has lots of interesting things in it, but we have been looking at Lord of the Rings, as I recall. Do you have any parts of it that you would like? Good, wonderful. I'm so sorry to taking us up to the end here.
I haven't got to Treebeard yet, but I'm getting close to it.
Has anybody found the spot they wanted to read? The spot they wanted to read from. Have you found the one?
No, still looking.
Oh, okay.
Save yourself.
While we're looking at that, let me ask some more questions. Have you looked further into papers in the Journal of Unschooling and Alternative Learning?
I think I looked at one. It was is there a curriculum in the house? I think that was the one. I like that one.
I really did like that one. I thought that one was excellent.
Still, I haven't really found anything interesting to write about that I would submit to them, however.
As much as anything else, I think what you need to understand is what they're talking about there, the kind of articles they present, and then look at your own experiences with homeschooling and see whether there's something in your experience that would fit into that area of interest. And Connor's mention earlier, for example, of starting to explain coordinates, Cartesian planes to this young man, was it? Mm-hmm. That's a perfect idea in a way. This seemed to need to have test groups and statistical analysis. It publishes a lot of things that are simply anecdotal. And it would make so much sense, I think, to talk about something like that. That tends to be made in class, that everything has to be regulated, everything has to be led by the teacher, controlled by the teacher. Makes the assumption that if you've got a teacher, that's the only way you can do it. What you just demonstrated was that that's not the only way it can be done. You see what I mean? Have you found it?
No, still looking.
Okay.
I just want to read the beginning of chapter 3.
Okay, why don't you go ahead and do that? Have you got enough light?
Huh?
Have you got enough light here?
Yeah, I've got enough light. Pippin lay in a dark and troubled dream. It seemed that he could hear his own small voice echoing in black tunnels, calling Frodo, Frodo. Instead of Frodo, hundreds of hideous orc faces grinned at him out of the shadows. Hundreds of hideous arms grasped at him from every side. Where was Merry? He woke. Cold air blew on his face. He was lying on his back. Evening was coming and the sky above was growing dim. He turned and found that the dream was little worse than the waking. His wrists, legs, and ankles were tied with cords. Beside him Merry lay, white-faced and with a dirty rag bound across his brows. All about them sat or stood a great company of orcs. Slowly in Pippin's aching head memory pieced itself together and became separated from dream shadows. Of course, he and Merry had run off into the woods. What had come over them? Why had they dashed off like that, taking no notice of old Strider? They had run along, did not remember how far or how long, but then suddenly they had crashed right into a group of orcs. They were standing and listening. They did not appear to see Merry and Pippin until they were almost in their arms. Then they yelled, and dozens of other goblins had sprung out of the trees. Merry and he had drawn their swords, but the orcs did not wish to fight, and they tried only to lay hold of them, even when Merry had cut off several of their arms and hands. Good old Merry. Then Boromir had come, leaping through the trees. He had made them fight. He slew many of them, and the rest fled, but they had not gone far on the way back when they were attacked again, by 100 orcs at least, some of them very shot a rain of arrows, always at Boromir. Boromir had blown his great horn till the woods rang, and at first the orcs had been dismayed and had drawn back, but when no answer but the echoes came, they attacked more fiercely than ever. Pippin did not remember much more. His last memory was of Boromir leaning against a tree, plucking out an arrow. Then darkness fell suddenly.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Surrounding background for what's going on here. Who is Boromir?
He's the son of Denethor and the captain of Gondor.
Right. Denethor is the steward of Gondor.
Yes.
And indeed, Boromir and the elder brother of Faramir, whom we will meet later on.
Wasn't he also the one that started to fall?
Indeed, he did. He felt that the ring was a tool that should be used and wielded by the peoples.
A lot like
His brother,
same view as
same view as his
Boromir.
brother. Yeah. Use it against him.
Right. Very good. Very good. And here, in a way, clearly he has redeemed himself for having fallen under the spell of the ring. But Frodo doesn't know that. Okay. Anything else you want to give us a background about that? Okay. Go ahead, Nick.
Mine is just a really short section. Neither Pippin nor Merry remembered much of the later peril of the journey. Waking were blended into a long tunnel of misery, with hope growing ever fainter behind. They ran, striving to keep up the pace set by the orcs, again with a cruel song cunningly handled. They halted or stumbled. If they halted or stumbled, they were seized and dragged for some distance. But the orc drought had gone. Pippin felt cold and sick again. Suddenly he fell face downward in the turf. Hard hands with rending nails gripped him and lifted him back once more, and darkness grew about him. Whether the darkness of another night or a blindness of his own eyes, he could not tell.
Very vivid and in so many ways reminiscent of the kind of things that you two have been writing. They're rather dismal and grim, and but we will see some more interesting things. Have you read up to the Treebeard part?
I haven't read up to Treebeard. I'm about to finish the Orc-Pie.
I'm just a few pages in.
Okay. Well, let's continue that for next time, indeed.
How far do we want to read for next week?
I'm trying to remember the names of the chapters. Can we follow ahead a bit? I think we're going to visit Edoras, and then we're going to have the Battle at Helm's Deep, and I think the chapters there. But
There's the White Rider, King of Golden Hall, Helm's Deep, and then the Road to Isengard. So do we want to go through Helm's Deep?
I like The Road to Isengard, but yeah, that's fine. However far you think you can comfortably think that listening to the audiobook would be a good thing, if you can, because you can just turn that on while you're washing the pig. Okay. I leave it up to you how we would like to finish things off here, but before we start into anything, I want specifically to make sure that we are covering all the bases that you need to cover. One of which is, am I giving you enough incentive and enough inspiration writing things yourself? One thing I'd like to suggest perhaps is you've been writing very effective narratives, and you've been you've all been writing nice things. I want to make sure that you have an opportunity to write in idioms that you're unfamiliar with, that do things differently. If you're writing narratives, try writing instructional matter. If you're writing fiction, try writing some nonfiction, or try writing some fiction. And I do think that it would be delightful if you'd like to try to put something together that would be appropriate for this particular journal that I've given you a link to. I think is an ideal choice because they're not picky. They're interested in anecdotal content that doesn't necessarily have to involve pre-tests and post-tests and statistics, and you will want to have references, and make sure that when you're reading other items in that journal or in other journals referred to in that journal, that you cite them appropriately in your work. But I think it would be delightful if you'd like to consider doing that. This, of course, is following up on what Gatto was saying. It makes absolutely no sense to prevent students from looking at adult material. You look at adult material and you realize very quickly that's not either. Okay. So we need to look at everything that would be of value. Are you getting enough? Are you getting enough language immersion?
Yep.
For example. Okay. I still think I need to find some more for you somewhere, but let's see how. There is something else that I have added to the class, and I'm going to ask you if you think it would be appropriate to make it an assignment. Lawrence Krauss, Noam Chomsky. I don't know why I'm shooting up there. Lawrence Krauss and Noam Chomsky. I came across this one just recently. I did not even know connection between these two. You've met Chomsky before, and I really enjoyed Krauss's introduction of Chomsky as regarded in the world as the top intellectual of the world, certainly the father of modern linguistics, and also many other fields. Now, he, of course, is also an American dissident, so he has his own. Krauss, who is Krauss? Does anybody know? He is perhaps one of the most visible, perhaps next to Neil deGrasse Tyson, of popular physicists. Now, is it possible to have a popular physicist? Anyway, certainly Hawking falls into that category, but he's not an American. Krauss is actually originally Canadian, I think. He is involved in the Origins project. I'm not sure exactly what the purpose of that one is, and teaches at Arizona State University. And he apparently studied at Massachusetts Institute of Technology. Chomsky has taught for ages, and knew him. So that was a connection I was unaware of. I had seen Krauss work, who were very interesting. So here the two of them from rather different fields sit down and talk for about 6 hours. it's enlightening in the sense that these are foremost thinkers in the world. The direction they take may not be universally acceptable in the sense that a lot of it is political and a lot of it is not necessarily American-friendly politics. It goes in many different directions. I liked it because of its criticism of our educational system, and the fact that we can do a whole lot better than that. Criticism of our journalism that tends to be very skewed and fragmentary and rewritten, and indeed critical thinking in education. And for those reasons, I just think it was a wonderful talk. Unfortunately, Krauss is one of the most educated Americans, I suppose you'd have to say, and his language is just sloppy and awkward, and there's another place I took a different talk of his and looked in, and he's just breaking grammar rules. And I know you folks will understand what he's doing wrong, and you'll make a point of not learning his language. Be careful with that. Chomsky's excellent. I mean, you would hope that the father of modern linguistics can speak fairly well. Doesn't really come up to the level of some of the other people we've studied, but it's solid and reliable. Anyway, would this interest to you?
Maybe.
Yeah, I think we should add that as an ongoing project.
You're quite right. It's a big thing. The first is their conversation, which is largely led by Krauss's questions. He asks a number of questions about one thing or another. Second half is in answer to audience questions, and those are very good questions in general, and well thought out. And it's a nice presentation, and it's one that'll make you think, make anybody think. I just discovered it yesterday, and I couldn't help sitting and listening to the whole thing. It's just really is that good. Okay, let me throw, if you'd like now. Again, I stress the fact that the things I tend to find are things that I'm interested in, end up giving them a particular bias, which may not be necessarily appropriate. And therefore, I invite you to find things that are at least equally eloquent, if possible, with other points of view, just so that we can balance things. I don't know of anything myself, but maybe you can find something and bring it in. See what I mean?
Yeah.
So, but please take this with a grain of salt and listen to it for the language. Watch for problems with language, because indeed you will find them, particularly in Krauss's language. It's just sloppy the way Americans tend to be. And I'm afraid that sloppiness tends to pervade higher education in this country in ways that it doesn't elsewhere. You won't find a Danish or a French academic speaking that way in English. Anyway, write some of them down as you. Anything else to our work here?
I can't think of any.
I think we have enough for now.
Do you really?
Thanks.
Okay.
2 6-hour-long talks to listen to. Well, the one audiobook, the what was it? The one by Stephen Hawking.
Right.
Oh,
Something.
The Grand Design.
Grand
Yeah,
Design.
yeah, Grand Design. That's right.
There's several others of his that are that we can put out. Look in other directions. If you have specific areas of interest, help me out here. Otherwise, I'll end up giving you interested in, and that isn't necessarily the most appropriate. Okay? Okay, let's add that on, and we'll bring ourselves to a conclusion here, and I look forward to seeing what you write for next week. And make sure you get your endnotes put together correctly. Okay, this is the end of the for homeschoolers at EIE.